Hi, my name's Miyuki. When I was 9, my parents told me I had to go live with my aunt, just until things got less crowded. But they never came back for me. They raised their real kids in the house I thought I'd grow up in. And now that I've built a life of my own, they're suddenly proud. They want my money, my name, my story. But how do you forgive people who only remember you once you're valuable again? And what happens when they show up at your award ceremony, smiling for the cameras like they never left? Let me tell you what really happened. I still remember the color of the sky that day. It was the kind of overcast you don't forget. That sticky gray that makes the air feel heavy, like it knows something's about to change. I was 9. The suitcase was too big for me, and I couldn't lift it by myself. My mother didn't offer to help. She just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her lips pressed into that thin, familiar line that always came right before she said something that would stick to my bones for years. "They need the space more than you right now, Miyuki. It's not permanent." I nodded. I didn't cry. I didn't ask who they were, though I knew. I'd heard the whispers, the closed-door conversations, the way she smiled when Romilly walked into the room, but barely looked up when it was me. I understood what wasn't being said. Dad didn't say a word either. He stood behind her like a coat rack, tall and still and utterly useless. I glanced at him once, hoping for a flicker of doubt in his eyes, something that said this wasn't right. But he wouldn't look at me. Aunt Leona's car was waiting in the driveway. The engine was running. I climbed into the back seat with my stuffed cat clutched to my chest and the seatbelt digging into my collarbone. As we pulled away, I kept my eyes on the side mirror. No one waved. At Leona's place, the rain had started to fall in thin, cold needles. She lived in a modest duplex, tight hallways, stained carpet, mismatched furniture that had been good enough since 1978. She tried to smile, told me I could take the extra room, but that room turned out to be a walk-in closet with a mattress on the floor and a single lamp flickering like it was holding its breath. That first night, I didn't unpack. I lay there waiting, telling myself maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe in the morning, Mom would call and say, "Come home." But the morning came and went. So did the next, and the one after that. By the second week, Leona sat me down at the tiny kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of gas station coffee. She didn't look at me when she said it. "I don't think they're coming back, honey." I didn't say anything. I just nodded like I already knew. I adjusted quickly because I had to. I learned which buses to take to get to school. I learned how to heat canned soup without burning it. I learned that waiting for someone to come back who never planned to hurts in a quiet, humiliating way. It doesn't make you cry. It makes you feel like you should have known better. Years passed in that same closet room. I studied hard. I worked part-time through high school, cash register, tutoring, late shifts at a laundromat. Leona did what she could, which mostly meant giving me space and occasionally leaving a plate of food outside my door. By the time I turned 18, I had built something resembling a life. That spring, I got my acceptance letter to NYU. It came in a big white envelope, thicker than the others. I opened it at the kitchen counter, my fingers trembling even though I knew what it was. I held it in my hands like proof that I wasn't what they made me feel like. Excess, leftover, inconvenient. Later that night, I took a photo of the letter and texted it to my mother. I thought maybe this was the thing that would make her respond. Not with money. I wasn't naive. But maybe a sentence, a word, some sort of acknowledgement. I waited, checked my phone before bed. Again the next morning. Nothing. No, I'm proud of you. No, good job. Not even a thumbs up. It's strange how silence can be so loud. It filled the room, seeped into my clothes, clung to the corners of the window like frost. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, still the same mattress on the closet floor, and realized something that would take years to admit out loud. It took her 5 seconds to delete my name from her world. It took me 10 years to delete hers. The invitation never came, but that didn't stop me from dressing up. Romilly was turning 16, sweet 16, the kind where everything was pink, rented, and ridiculous. I hadn't been included in anything for years, but a cousin had let it slip during a Sunday school drop-off that there was going to be a party. Big. Catered. All family invited. So I figured maybe, just maybe, they'd forgotten to send mine. It was late afternoon when I arrived. The gated driveway loomed in front of me, iron bars polished like they were trying to impress someone. I stood there holding a gift bag with a ribbon I'd ironed flat that morning. Inside was a bracelet I'd saved up for at the pharmacy, a delicate chain with fake pearls, still taped inside the clear plastic box. The kind of gift a little sister gives when she wants to feel included. There was a security guard at the entrance with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset. "Name?" he asked, not unkindly. "Miyuki Brandt," I replied, adjusting the strap on my second-hand dress. He scanned the list, flipped the page, flipped it back. "Sorry, you're not on the guest list." I blinked. My voice cracked when I tried to smile. "Maybe it was a mistake. She's my sister." He didn't move. "Can't let you in, ma'am. Orders are clear. No entry without your name here." I stepped back, nodding like I understood. Behind him, I saw them. Through the slats of the gate, Romilly in a satin gown, laughing with a group of girls. My mother, hair curled, holding a glass of champagne. And then, she turned. She saw me. Our eyes locked for 1 second, maybe 2. Then she looked away. No shock, no guilt. She just turned back to the conversation. The gift bag suddenly felt heavy in my hand. I walked a few feet to the curb and sat down. I stayed there for almost 3 hours, the concrete burning through the back of my dress as the sun slipped behind the house. Cars came and went. Music thumped from behind the gate. I could hear her voice, Romilly's, yelling over the beat about some gift she'd opened. It wasn't mine. I thought about knocking. I thought about screaming. But instead, I waited for a text. Nothing came. By the time the moon showed up, the shadows from the oak trees had stretched across the pavement like they were trying to reach me. My legs were stiff. My pride was gone. But my mind was sharper than ever. People like to tell you that family is everything, that no matter how bad things get, blood sticks. But sometimes, blood stains. And nobody wants to claim the mess. The next morning, after a silent ride home with Leona, I sat in the kitchen, still clutching the unopened gift bag. The plastic bracelet had fogged up in its packaging from the temperature change. Leona poured me some orange juice and sat across from me. "Maybe your mom didn't forget," she said softly, not looking at me. "Maybe she just didn't want to be reminded." I didn't ask her what that meant. I already knew. From that day on, I started building a new rule in my head. A kind of armor. When people disappear long enough, you start inventing reasons for them. Not because you believe them, but because it hurts less than the truth. I wasn't mad. I wasn't sad anymore either. I was tired of standing at gates that would never open. Later that night, after I'd changed into my pajamas and tucked the bracelet away in a shoebox beneath my bed, Leona knocked gently on the doorframe of my closet room. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, not turning around. "I'm used to it." She sighed. "You shouldn't have to be." I didn't answer. The next day at school, someone asked me how the party was. I said I didn't go because I had other plans. They nodded like they understood. But they didn't. Only I knew what it felt like to be shut out by people who shared your face, but not your heart. Only I knew what it felt like to be outside the gate, with a gift no one ever opened. I didn't talk about the party after that. Not to Leona, not to anyone at school, not even to myself. I boxed it up in the back of my mind the same way I tucked the unopened gift into the bottom drawer beneath my sweaters. Out of sight, out of reach. It was midwinter a few years later, during a rare afternoon off from school, when I decided to help Leona reorganize the hallway closet. She'd been nagging me about it for weeks, and truthfully, I needed the distraction. We were pulling out old board games and boxes of tax files when I came across a dusty photo album wedged behind a stack of National Geographics. The cover was torn at the spine, corners fraying like it had been handled 100 times and loved by none. I opened it without thinking, flipping past the first few pages. Baby photos of Romilly, vacations in Myrtle Beach, mom and dad smiling like nothing in the world had ever hurt them. Then came the birthdays, Christmases, 4th of July cookouts, all lined up in glossy snapshots, and not a single one included me. Not one. Even in the group shots, I was absent. There was a Christmas photo from what I knew was the year I'd been sent away. I remembered being in that room. Leona had taken me to drop off a card and some cookies at the house, but in the picture, it was as if I'd never existed. The back of the photo had names scrawled in my mother's handwriting. My name had been written, then scratched out. I stared at that pen mark for longer than I should have. It wasn't bold or angry, just deliberate. And that made it worse. When you're young, you think being forgotten is the worst thing. But being deliberately removed? That cuts deeper. It means someone made a choice. I closed the album and didn't mention it to Leona. I didn't want her pity. I'd grown past wanting anyone to feel bad on my behalf. Later that night, I went back to my closet room. Same mattress on the floor. Same lamp Leona had replaced last summer when the old one fizzled out. She'd never said anything about it, just swapped it quietly, like she always did. It was her way of showing care. Upgrades without explanation. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, tugged the sleeves of my sweatshirt over my hands, and pulled out my headphones. Music was my escape back then. Cheap headphones, old tracks downloaded off sketchy sites. It didn't matter. It worked. As I laid back against the wall, I glanced at the ceiling and thought, not for the first time, so this is it. The closet had stopped being temporary a long time ago. It had become mine by default. Nobody had called in years. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even when I made the honor roll. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if she would even recognize my voice now. Would she answer if I called and said nothing? Would she know it was me? I never found out. I stopped calling after the third unanswered message when I was 12, figured that was enough begging for a lifetime. A few days later, Leona came home from work with a brown paper bag of groceries. I helped her unload them, mostly canned goods and freezer meals. While I was stacking green beans in the cabinet, she said, almost like an afterthought, "School's hosting some awards thing this Thursday. They mentioned your name." I blinked. They did. "Yeah, some community service thing. You got nominated. They want you there." The auditorium was packed that night. Parents in stiff button-downs, moms with proud tears, siblings fidgeting in their chairs. Leona came. She wore her nicest blouse and brought a disposable camera from Walgreens. I knew better than to expect anyone else. When it was my turn, I walked up to the stage and took the certificate without flinching. People clapped. The principal smiled. It was all very polished. In the program brochure, under each student's name, there was a photo section labeled My Family. Most had pictures, graduation shots, family vacations, studio portraits. Mine was blank. The space beneath my name sat white and untouched, like it had been skipped on purpose. I didn't explain why I hadn't submitted anything, because how do you send in a photo when none exist? As I sat back down next to Leona, she didn't say anything, just reached over and gave my hand a quiet squeeze. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I'd started learning how to survive applause meant for people who were never in the picture to begin with. Some girls get erased from the frame. Others learn to stop standing still. The certificate from the school ceremony stayed folded in my top drawer for months. I never framed it, never mentioned it again. But something about that empty photo box on the program, it changed me. I stopped wondering if they'd come back. I stopped hoping they'd see me. Then, out of nowhere, they did. It started with a voicemail. I was doing dishes late one night. The window cracked open to let out the steam from the pasta pot still hissing on the stove. My phone buzzed against the counter, and I wiped my hands on my shirt before pressing play. "Hey, it's Mom. Just thought it'd be nice to catch up. You know, have dinner, like old times." I stared at the phone for a while. letting the water run until it overflowed the sink. There were no old times, not between us. Whatever history she thought we shared, it didn't exist on my side of the timeline. I didn't call back, not right away. I sat with it for a few days, replayed the message more times than I want to admit. Her voice had a softness I didn't recognize, like she was trying on empathy for the first time and wasn't sure if it fit. Eventually, curiosity won. I agreed to meet. One dinner, I told myself. No expectations. Just closure, if that's what she was really offering. The restaurant she picked was in Charleston, upscale. White tablecloths, crystal water glasses, piano music that was meant to feel elegant but came off as forced. I arrived 5 minutes early. They were already there. All of them. My mother, in pearls and a fresh blowout. My father, still as expressionless as I remembered. Romilly, tapping on her phone like she hadn't spent a decade pretending I didn't exist. And then, Jaron. I hadn't seen my younger brother since he was a teenager. Now he was a man with perfect teeth and a designer watch, like someone who'd stepped out of a catalog for people who don't sweat. They all stood when I approached, like this was some reunion show, and I was the dramatic reveal. "We're so proud of you," Mom said, pulling me into a hug that didn't land. "Look at you, successful, strong, just like we raised you to be. Like they'd raised me." Dinner started with small talk. Romilly mentioned a yoga retreat. Dad nodded silently, cutting into his steak like it owed him money. I sipped water and waited. The real reason I was there came with the dessert menus. "We actually wanted to ask you something," Jaron said, leaning forward with practiced charm. "I'm starting a business. It's got real potential. And we thought, maybe this could be a family thing. You know, finally reconnect. Build something together." Mom chimed in before I could respond. "You've got more than enough now, Miyuki. It's not about money. It's about legacy. About helping your brother succeed like you did." Romilly added, "It would mean a lot to all of us." I looked at the three of them, polished, rehearsed, dripping in that fake warmth they only seem to find when they want something. My father said nothing. He never did. His silence was his favorite form of denial. I folded my napkin slowly and set it beside my plate. "You think because I have a few commas in my bank account now, you can rewrite how this went?" I said, quietly but firmly. "You didn't raise me. You removed me. You chose a version of this family without me in it. And now that I made it anyway, you want to stick your names on the end of my story?" "Miyuki!" my mother snapped, the softness gone in an instant. "Don't be dramatic. We did what we had to do." "No," I said, standing up. "You did what made your lives easier. Don't confuse the two." Outside, the rain had started to come down. Not heavy, but enough to make the air thick with the smell of wet concrete. I pulled my coat tighter and stepped away from the restaurant's glow, heading for my car parked down the block. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice again. "You owe us, Miyuki, after everything we gave up for you." I stopped walking, turned halfway, enough to see her standing in the doorway, arms out like she was on stage. "I paid for my own survival," I said. "I won't fund your rewrite of my story." Then I got in the car and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even raise my voice. But what scared them most was that I finally knew that. I didn't hear from them again for a few days after that dinner. The silence felt like an echo chamber I'd lived in once before, predictable, hollow, and strangely comforting. But just as I'd begun to settle back into the quiet, the call started. The first one came on a Tuesday morning while I was in a meeting. It went to voicemail, so did the next 3. By the end of the day, I had 7 missed calls. 2 from my mother, 1 from Romilly, and 4 from numbers I didn't recognize, but carried the same area code I hadn't dialed since I was a teenager. I listened to them that night, sitting on the couch with a bowl of cold rice in my lap and the TV playing something forgettable in the background. "Hi, sweetheart," my mother said in the first message, her tone overly sweet and eerily measured. "I've been thinking about our dinner. I'm sorry if we came on too strong, but we really believe in family, you know? We were there when you had nothing. It wouldn't kill you to give something back." Romilly's voice in the next one sounded clipped, like she was annoyed she even had to do this. "Hey, I don't know what your problem is, but Jaren's been working really hard on this. He's actually trying. You of all people should understand how important a second chance is." And then came the worst of them, the ones from the unrecognizable voices, the family friends, the church ladies, the cousins I hadn't spoken to in over 2 decades. "It's embarrassing, Miyuki," one woman sighed into the phone. "You're making your parents look bad. People are talking. What kind of daughter treats her mother like that?" That line stuck, not because it hurt, but because it was textbook. Public pressure disguised as morality. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't owe them an explanation. But I knew it wasn't over. A few days later, while I was folding laundry in my apartment, my phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but the caller ID said, "Mom." Something told me to pick up. I answered on the 4th ring. "Miyuki?" Her voice was thin, like she'd been crying. "I'm here," I said calmly. She exhaled like it was rehearsed. I don't know what we did to make you so cold. We did our best. Do you think it was easy raising a child on our own? Do you think it didn't cost us anything?" "Mom," I interrupted, "you didn't raise me." There was silence, then a sniff. "We loved you." "No, you loved the idea of me, until I became inconvenient." "Miyuki," she said sharply, "that's not fair." "No," I replied. "What's not fair is rewriting the past so you can live with it." I hung up. Not in anger, but in clarity. Later that evening, the guilt campaign escalated into video. Romilly sent a group chat message, me, her, and Jaren, linked to a video call. I nearly declined, but some part of me wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. They were both on camera when I joined. Romilly with her perfect posture, sipping something green out of a glass mug. Jaren in a crisp shirt, probably freshly ironed by someone he never tipped enough. My mother wasn't on the call this time, but her absence was a tactic, not an accident. Romilly started. "Look, we're not trying to guilt trip you, but there's a way to do things, Miyuki. You don't just ice out your family because you're doing well." "You mean the family that iced me out first?" I asked. "You think everything we did was out of malice?" Jaren added. "Come on! You've got more now than you ever would have had if you stayed. You should be thanking us." I blinked slowly. "You honestly believe I owe you for being thrown away?" Romilly's tone turned bitter. "Don't be dramatic." "What you gave me," I said, "was silence. I built something in spite of that, not because of it." I left the call before they could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional city siren in the distance. I sat at my desk and pulled out a piece of stationery I hadn't touched in years. I wrote them a letter, not to send, but to say what I needed. "I don't hate you. I'm not bitter. I just refuse to be the product of a narrative you now want to revise. I don't exist to ease your guilt or prop up your story. I am my own beginning, and you don't get to insert yourselves into the middle now that there's an ending you find convenient." I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer, with the rest of the things I've outgrown. And just like that, I started sleeping better again. The following morning, I felt different. Not lighter exactly, just cleaner. As if something that had been rotting in me for years had finally been cut out. I didn't need a reply to that letter. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them out of the way. But I'd underestimated them. It started with a screenshot. I was on my lunch break, sitting at a quiet corner table in a cafe near my office, when a friend from Charleston, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, texted me a message that simply read, "Is this about you?" I opened the attachment. There it was, a Facebook post from my mother. Public. Tagged. Shared. Some children forget who raised them. Some choose wealth over family. I did my part. and God sees everything. Attached was a photo of me as a little girl, probably 6 or 7, missing teeth, bangs uneven, smiling like I still believed things would work out. The caption under the image said, "She changed, we didn't." My first reaction wasn't shock, it was disgust. The way she used that photo, that specific moment in time, to suggest she had anything to do with who I became, it was calculated, deliberate. By the time I finished my coffee, the post had gained over 60 likes, mostly women I vaguely remembered from our old church, cousins who hadn't sent a birthday card in decades, neighbors who only ever saw me as the one they sent away. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I took screenshots. Every single comment, every share, every tag. And the comments, they stung. She used to be so sweet. Guess money really does change people. I remember when her mom would walk her to Sunday school every week. Shame what success does to loyalty. Mothers aren't perfect, but they're still your mother. It was a well-organized character assassination, cloaked in faux spirituality and sweet Southern passive aggression. I muted my phone and went back to work. My face didn't change. My tone stayed even. But something shifted internally. A click, like a lock turning in the dark. That night, after I'd double-checked every legal document tied to my name, I emailed my attorney, Mr. Kroll. I told him what was happening, included the screenshots, and asked what recourse I had to shut it down. He called me first thing the next morning. "This is textbook defamation," he said. "The kind that doesn't seem like much, until it costs you something. You're a public figure in your field now. Let's not wait until it damages more than your name." By the end of that week, we had a formal cease and desist letter drafted. I read it twice before signing. "To Delora and Harlan Brandt," it began. "This letter serves as official notice to immediately cease all defamatory, harassing, and emotionally manipulative communication directed at or concerning our client, Miyuki Rhodes." I didn't send it by email. I paid extra to have it hand-delivered. I wanted them to open something for once and realize it wasn't a gift. The day it was delivered, I kept my phone close, half expecting another avalanche of voicemails or a dramatic post about being betrayed by their own daughter. But nothing came. Not immediately. Instead, I got texts from more people in Charleston, people I hadn't spoken to since I was a child. Some asked if I was okay. Others just said, "Your mom seems hurt. Maybe give her a call?" It was almost funny, as if damage control wasn't a strategy, but a prayer request. I didn't respond to any of them. Later that week, I met with Kroll in his office. We sat across from each other, the letter laid out between us, and he asked, "What outcome are you hoping for?" I didn't hesitate. "I don't want an apology. I want distance, papered and documented." He nodded. "You're not the first client to ask for that. But most people still hope the other side will change." I looked him in the eye. I stopped hoping when I was 9. As I walked home that evening, the sun was starting to dip behind the skyline, casting long shadows on the street. I passed a florist and bought a single daisy. No reason. Just because it felt like something the girl in that childhood photo might have liked. When I got home, I placed it in a small glass on the kitchen counter. Then I logged off everything. No more feeds, no more mentions, no more holes in my piece disguised as family outreach. They wanted a scene. I gave them silence. They wanted guilt. I gave them paperwork. 3 weeks passed after the cease and desist letter was served. Quiet weeks, no calls, no sudden, "How have you been?" texts from relatives I barely remembered. No fresh social media campaigns disguised as prayers. It would have felt like peace if I didn't know better. One Saturday morning, I returned from the grocery store and found a padded envelope tucked into my mail slot. No sender listed. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, a version of my grandmother Hazel's will. Only this one didn't look like the one I remembered her showing me years ago, in her kitchen, while she was still lucid and still trusted. In that version, I was her sole heir. In this one, my name was gone. Deleted. No notes, no corrections, just a clean surgical removal, as if I'd never existed in her lineage at all. Everything was listed under Delora and Romilly. The signature page looked newer, printed with a different date than the original I recalled. For a moment, I thought I might scream. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, and took out my phone. "Leona," I said when she answered, her voice soft with sleep. "Do you still have the original will?" She didn't hesitate. "It's in my desk drawer. Why?" I exhaled. "Because someone's been playing God again, and this time they brought ink." 2 days later, a copy of Hazel's handwritten will arrived via overnight mail. My name was there, in capital letters, underlined. She hadn't left me the house out of obligation. She'd made that choice on purpose. I called Kroll the next morning. The following Monday, we filed a formal petition in Charleston County to contest the most recent version of the will and trigger a probate hearing. This wasn't about property. It never was. I didn't need the house. I didn't even want it. What I wanted, what I demanded, was the truth on record. The day of the hearing, the courthouse lobby buzzed like a wasp nest. Local attorneys, paralegals, family friends, who had clearly taken the day off just to spectate. Some people smiled at me with sympathy. Some didn't hide their judgment. Delora sat 2 rows ahead of me, in a lavender blazer and pearls, the picture of a mother scorned but composed. Romilly wore black, as if this were a funeral. Harlan looked the same as always, present in body, absent in spirit. The judge, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses and the aura of someone who didn't tolerate posturing, called us to order. Kroll presented our evidence clearly and calmly. The date discrepancies, the differences in witnesses, the missing language that Hazel had always insisted on including. And then he pulled out a flash drive. "If the court will allow," he said, "we have an audio file, recorded accidentally by Ms. Leona Vass during a phone call with Mrs. Brandt. The content is relevant to the decedent's intent regarding the will." The judge nodded. The courtroom fell still as the playback began. Delora's voice crackled through the speakers, sharp and unmistakable. "Miyuki! That girl's not worth keeping. She's just a mouth we don't need." There was an audible intake of breath across the room. I didn't move. Romilly turned toward Delora, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. Delora said nothing. Her chin lifted slightly, defiant in the face of her own voice. The judge asked for silence. Then, after a brief recess, she returned with her decision. The court finds sufficient cause to validate the original version of the will submitted by Ms. Rhodes and deems the revised version inadmissible due to inconsistent execution and evidence of undue influence. It was over. No fireworks, no shouting, just the dry thud of a gavel and the rustling of papers. Outside, the clouds had started to gather, pushing the sun behind a dense layer of gray. I didn't stay long. I shook Kroll's hand, thanked him, and walked toward the exit. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard the clicking of heels behind me. Delora. She caught up quickly, stepping in front of me. "You think you're better than us now?" she said, voice low but venomous. I paused, looked her in the eye. "No," I said evenly. "I just don't need to be part of you anymore." She blinked. Once. Twice. Then scoffed and walked away, her heels tapping the pavement in a staccato rhythm I didn't follow. I stood there a moment longer. Then I turned in the opposite direction and kept walking, and that was the last time I let her speak my name without earning it. The morning of the ruling came quietly. No texts, no warnings, no passive-aggressive prayers posted on social media. Just a gray sky, a silent cab ride to the courthouse, and the rustle of case files in Kroll's briefcase beside me. Inside, the courtroom was half empty. No camera crews, no cousins whispering behind their hands, no Romilly with her disapproving glances. Delora and Harlan weren't even there. I had a feeling they already knew the outcome. The judge entered, glasses perched low on her nose, and read through the findings without theatrics. It was clinical, precise, and exactly what I needed. This court validates the original will submitted by Ms. Miyuki Rhodes, she said, and rules that all revisions submitted after the decedent's date of cognitive decline are null. The gavel came down like punctuation at the end of a long, misshapen sentence. It was over. Kral shook my hand as we stepped into the hallway. I thanked him, then made my way outside alone. The Charleston air was thick that day, the kind of humidity that clings to your skin like old regret. I didn't go back to New York right away. A few days later, I was invited to a local business recognition event, some Chamber of Commerce thing I barely remembered agreeing to. They wanted to honor me for my philanthropic work, especially for a small scholarship I'd started in my grandmother Hazel's name. I thought about skipping it, but something inside me said I should go. So I did. The event was held in a ballroom downtown. Lights dimmed just enough to feel expensive, servers carrying silver trays of bite-sized food that tasted like paper. I wore a navy dress and no jewelry. I didn't want to shine, I just wanted to show up. And then, halfway through the night, I saw them. Delora and Harlan, seated near the front, dressed as if this were their gala. My stomach clenched, but I kept moving, one foot in front of the other. I didn't approach. I didn't wave. I simply waited for my moment. They didn't wait at all. Before the formal part of the program began, I overheard Delora speaking with a local news crew. "She's always been driven," she said, her voice warm, sugary. "We raised her to work hard, to aim high. We couldn't be prouder." Harlan nodded beside her like a decorative prop. I stood behind a pillar and listened. She was rewriting the entire script again, except this time the audience was the public. "She's very private," Delora continued, "but we've always been a tight-knit family. We support each other in everything." I nearly laughed, but I didn't. I saved it. When the MC finally called my name, I walked to the stage slowly, heels quiet on the carpet, hands steady despite the fire in my chest. They handed me a glass award with my name etched into the surface, and I thanked them with a polite nod. Then I turned to the mic. The room hushed. "I didn't grow up in a home," I began, voice level. "I grew up in a closet. I studied by the light of a desk lamp that flickered every time the heater kicked on. I paid my way through school working shifts that didn't end until morning. No one clapped for me back then. No one claimed me when it was inconvenient." A ripple moved through the audience. I let it settle before continuing. "So, if you see me standing here tonight, don't mistake it for some story of a supportive family lifting their daughter toward greatness. I didn't arrive here by invitation. I built the door myself, and I walked through it alone." Silence, then slowly applause. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't the kind that lifts a roof off, but it was honest, earned. I stepped down without looking at the table where Delora and Harlan sat, but I felt them leave. I didn't need to look to know her smile had cracked, that his silence had deepened. Later, outside the building, I stood for a while under the awning, letting the wind touch my face. One of the organizers approached and asked if I wanted to stay for photos. "No," I said. "I think I've said what I needed." As I walked back toward my car, I passed a flower shop and stopped to buy another daisy, same as before. I placed it on the passenger seat and smiled at the ridiculous tenderness of it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was mine. The next morning, I woke up early, not from an alarm, but from the quiet hum of something unfamiliar. Peace. I made coffee, black and strong, then stood by the window watching the steam curl upward like a ribbon trying to escape. I was halfway through my second cup when my phone lit up on the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. It was a text. Just a single sentence. "Hey, I saw the speech. I don't want anything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, and I hope you're okay." It was from Ephraim. I hadn't heard from him in years. My older brother, the one who never spoke against what happened, but also never joined in. He'd stayed silent like Dad, but there was something about his silence that felt different, less of an escape, more of a prison he'd built around himself. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type anything. There was no anger left in me for him, no hunger for apology either. But that message, it meant something. Maybe not everything, but enough. I smiled softly and placed the phone face down. By the end of that week, I was back in Charleston, not for court, not for confrontation, but for something else. I parked in front of the house Hazel had left me, the one they tried to erase me from, and stepped out into the late afternoon sun. The lawn had grown wild since the last time I was there, vines creeping along the porch railing like the house was trying to reclaim itself. I didn't flinch. Inside, everything still smelled faintly of old furniture and lavender soap. I opened every window, let the light pour in, and walked room to room in silence. I wasn't here to move in. I was here to transform it. Over the next few weeks, I met with lawyers, contractors, nonprofit advisors. I signed paperwork. I built a mission. I named it the Hazel Initiative. It would be a home, not for me, but for young women aging out of foster care. The ones who'd spent too many birthdays in shelters, too many nights in temporary places that became permanent far too quickly. They'd get clean rooms, a roof, someone to listen, and the dignity of not having to beg for love. When the city asked for a mission statement, I wrote it myself. Not everyone gets a second chance, but sometimes you can build one for someone else. It wasn't about being noble. It was about choosing to plant something in the soil where I was once buried. On the day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I kept it small. No press, no speeches, no honorary plaques. Just the new residents, a few trusted friends, and a quiet moment under the front porch where Hazel once sat with a book in her lap and the world at a distance. That night, as the house settled with its new heartbeat, I stayed behind for a little while. I sat on the front steps with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the porch light buzz gently above me. No one else was around, just the night air and the faint sound of laughter from inside. The kind I never heard in that house growing up. And for the first time, I didn't feel like something was missing. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from Ephraim again. Just 2 words this time. Thank you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They still don't know me. They still might say my name with bitterness. But it doesn't matter. I don't live in that house anymore, physically or emotionally. And for the first time, I don't need them to come looking. Some family leaves scars. Some leave shadows. But sometimes we get to decide what grows in their place. Before we wrap this story, I want to say something from my heart, especially to anyone out there who's ever been pushed aside, talked over, or told to stay silent. Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't what they did to you. It's realizing they'll never apologize for it, and still choosing to move forward anyway. I used to think justice had to look like revenge, that it had to be loud, painful, final. But now I know the real win is peace. Quiet, steady, self-built peace. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not go back, even when the door finally opens. So here's my question to you. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever built your life from pieces they didn't want? If that's your story, or even part of it, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know. If this story hit home, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, I still want to hear why. Let's start a real conversation. And if you've ever had to rebuild after being erased, know that you're not alone. If this video spoke to you, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got more real stories coming. Stories that heal, stories that hurt, and stories that might just help you breathe a little deeper. Thanks for being here. I'm listening, always.